What's up, Bulls fans, and welcome back to another episode of It's Brewing at McEwen. I'm your host this evening, Adam Cartwright. We got a really good show for you planned tonight. Got a series win against Rice, and then we got a midweek coming up against Jacksonville. But I am not alone. With me, as always, is one of my co-hosts, and tonight I have Matt Giardino. Matt, are you ready, bud? How you doing?
Doing good, great actually. Great weekend series win by our Bulls. Another weekend of amazing pitching. Not a whole lot to complain about.
Absolutely. Well, little bit of scheduling. We are going to try to get back to our 2 episodes per week. So this episode will kind of be a little shorter than the ones we've had, but we're still going to have a ton of insight. Again, we're going to be able to look at our series win against Rice, which I thought was pretty awesome. I think Rice is a lot better than I think some people give them credit for, and we'll look at that as we go. And then, like I said, we're going to look at our midweek against Jacksonville. Then we'll take a look at some of our partners around the conference and see what they did and see what they have coming up as well in this midweek. Well, like I said, we're going to start with that series against Rice, which started with Friday night, where the Bulls actually dropped the opener on Friday night. First time losing on Friday night, which gave Edwin Alisea his first loss. What did you think about the pitching on Friday?
Yeah, it wasn't Edwin's best start, but overall, we did stay in the game. Ultimately it was a one-run outcome. This whole season we've had excellent pitching. It wasn't exactly what we were hoping for, but at the same time, it definitely gave the offense enough time to get back into the game.
Yeah, when I looked at it, I thought it was just one of those games where you kind of have to tip your hat to Rice. Alisea didn't have any walks. I don't believe he had any. There was one hit by pitch. Uh, so, I mean, he was in the zone. He did get 4 strikeouts. They just hit it. They hit it. They were able to get 5 runs across in the end, and that ended up being enough. But Nolan Bernard also had a great outing in relief with 2.2 innings, had 5 strikeouts. What did you think about him coming in? We haven't seen him on Friday night. It's usually Sutton, but we saw Bernard here. What'd you think?
No, he looked excellent. And, I think in the beginning of the season, I think he had a couple of shaky outings, but he's really come and turned things around. I think even in his last four outings, he's done really well. We've always known that he has the stuff. He's got a pretty good sweeper as well as a really good velocity on his fastball. He's got all the talent in the world, and it seems like he's starting to piece it all together.
Yeah, absolutely. Really good to see him on the back end. Well, Bulls offensively did have 10 hits, but it turned out to be just one of those games where we just couldn't get enough across. It seems like we finally started to get some stuff going late, and really, I just felt like it was one of those games where you felt like we just ran out of outs, kind of ran out of time when you thought we might have been on the comeback there. What did you think offensively?
And ultimately, we kept the game close and we had opportunities. I feel like we left a few guys on base that could have turned the outcome of the game, but ultimately, we did stay in the game and we just, we couldn't capitalize when we needed to.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's just one of those games where I don't think we had a lot of strikeouts, only four, but it just kind of felt like in this one that they just came at a really bad time. I think there were a couple times we had the bases loaded and we just weren't able to get a few runs across. And in the end, that cost us. But we did out hit them. We out hit them, I believe, all weekend, which was something that carried over. Nathan Early had a 2-hit game here, 2 RBIs. He really had a really big weekend at a time when I think he really needed it. He actually showed off the power numbers here later on, and we'll talk about that. But Jacob Green and Jevin Relaford also added multi-hit games in this one. Um, so again, it's hard to really fault it. I think at the end you just have to kind of chalk this up as a really good baseball game, which is kind of what I thought it was as you were watching it. It was just a really good baseball game. And Rice, like I said, I think they're a really good baseball team, and sometimes you come up short in those. But I thought it was really important with how we rebounded, and I thought we did really well. Do you have any final thoughts on Friday night before we go into that?
Yeah, I think the one thing that really benefited us a lot and allowed us to have success later in the weekend was the fact that even though Alisea didn't have his best stuff, he still was able to go 6.1 innings. So, if you have your starter giving you that much, um, that much innings, like, you're going to end up having a rested bullpen for the rest of the weekend.
Absolutely. And speaking about rested bullpens, this next guy, he barely needed one. Michael Sine was absolutely fantastic on his way to a second consecutive American Conference Pitcher of the Week. He's going to get the win. He is 4-0. Ethan Sutton picks up the save. What did you think of Sine?
That was another masterclass. He's been giving those to us all season long, and that was nothing short of brilliant. He went 8 and 2/3 innings. I think, he'd gotten up to 111 pitches. So, once you get to that many pitches, you want to be a little bit careful. But there's no doubt in my mind that he probably could have recorded that last out too and gotten that complete game shutout. But I mean, unbelievable what he's done as a freshman this year. He had a lot of big time opportunities coming out of high school, and he decided to come to USF. And with that, he's been nothing short of spectacular with pitching to a .68 ERA, a WHIP well below 1. He's just been a dominant factor for us all season long.
Yeah, it's one of those things where we started off talking about, wow, look at this freshman. And now I think we've gotten to a point where I think I've even mentioned it in a previous podcast. I don't really look at him as a freshman anymore. He's kind of developing to where he's maybe like a freshman plus, right? He's growing, but when you start looking at the numbers that he's putting up, he starts off as like, hey, this is a real contender for, conference freshman of the year. Now I think you're looking at him like, hey, this might be the pitcher of the year, right? Freshman or not. If he keeps putting up performances like this, especially in conference play, it's going to be hard to argue that, right? 8.2 innings, 9 strikeouts, 1 walk, 3 hits. Um, I even said it, in our group chat watching the game. I hated for him after he gave up that hit in the ninth, but I thought it was the right decision to go to Sutton there. Um, just to kind of give something fresh there. You just really would have hated it to kind of slide at that point for him. Again, I think he probably could have got out of it, but then there's just that chance that things go really, really south. And so getting that fresh arm in there just to get that last out. We've seen him do it in the past. We've seen O'Donnell come in with and just get the kind of the one out on the end. It's a very important out, to get that last one. And so I thought it was the right decision to go to Sutton there. What did you think about him and his short outing?
Yeah, it was actually his fourth save of the year. I believe he leads the team now. I think he's really developed his role and kind of has settled in that really well. Every time he goes out there, I feel really confident that we're gonna lock things down. But back to Michael Sine real quick, I think also another thing that's been impressive about him is just his overall efficiency with his pitches. I think maybe towards the end of his start, he did have some higher pitch count innings, but overall, he was like going into the eighth inning, he was pitching maybe on average 10 pitches per inning. And that's just something that's extremely impressive also.
Yeah, I want to say it was either the fifth or the sixth or the sixth or the seventh, or it was 2 innings kind of around in that kind of later middle, where they were both like 6 pitch innings. It was like 12 pitches through 6 outs. It was like, wow. Um, and that's the type of innings that you're going to need if you're going to go deep into games. It's not about, always going out there and just striking everybody out. If you're going to go through 9 innings and try to get a complete game or try to get into these, the 8.2 like we saw, you're going to have to just get some outs, right, to get through the game. You can't, striking out people takes a lot of pitches. uh, but
Yeah, and
I'll go ahead.
he wasn't short. He wasn't short on strikeouts
No,
either, which is
no,
pretty
absolutely
amazing.
not. No, yeah, 9 strikeouts over the game. Fantastic performance for him. Offensively, we did get enough to win this one. It was actually very, very dry for a long part of this. It was a pitcher's duel. Give a shout out real quick to the Rice side. They had a guy get a little shaky. They quickly went to this young man, lefty Braden Sharp, and he had a really good game. 2 walks, 11 strikeouts in 5 innings, and 89 pitch count. But that's kind of what I was talking about. He was very strikeout heavy in his outs, right? So his pitch count kind of got up there. He was at 89 pitches at 5, much less efficient than what Sine was doing before they went to Traeger in the end. But you got to give him his credit. He was really giving us fits up there. Ryan Pruitt and Brad Keylori both collect hits. Nobody had multi-hits here. Um, uh, yeah, what do you think offensively? Like I said, just really bare.
Yeah, I mean, Early got us started with I believe it was a sacrifice fly, and then Jevin Relaford, he had a triple, so that was good to see, and he also brought in an insurance run with a fielder's choice later in the eighth inning. Like you said, not a whole lot to write home about when it came to the offense, but we did do enough, and it doesn't seem like you need a whole lot when Sané's on the mound, so um, we got the win.
Absolutely. And I heard this in the broadcast. This team actually leads the nation in sacrifice flies. And so, we talk about those hustle RBIs. You talked about, getting the RBI in the fielder's choice. Um, but on the other side of that is the sacrifice fly. When a guy is on third, less than two outs, we're just trying to get the ball in the air in the outfield. We're doing that at a pretty high rate, apparently, right? Better than everybody in the nation. And it's just those little things that we talk about. That's how you win games without playing the power game. But yeah, like you
Yeah,
said,
when
in
you're
the end, it ended up being enough. 11 guys left on base, just a real struggle.
Yeah, when your team ERA is pretty much three flat, you can you don't have to have your best hitting and still come out with the win.
Absolutely. And that's a good point because we've talked about this in some years past, not necessarily Mitch Hanna years, but previous to that, where we had games where it was like, sometimes our offense is on, but our pitching isn't there, and then sometimes our pitching is on, but our offense isn't there. And so, and it just feels like in this case, we're either both on, or if one's on, the other one's enough to kind of carry it over. And you're gonna have to do that. That's how you end up being 20-4, right?
Absolutely.
Well, that led us into the rubber match where it seems like the Bulls, not necessarily offense, because again, like I said, hitting was there. 7 hits on Saturday. We had 13 hits on Sunday as Caden Smith picks up the win. I'm sorry, Will Allen started. Then Dominic Pombriant comes in, followed by Caden Smith, and then another appearance for Nolan Bernard. What did you think about Sunday when you saw the pitchers?
Yeah, honestly, it kind of raises some concerns for me when it comes to Landon Urich's health because he's been kind of penned into that Sunday spot the whole year. So it'll be interesting to see what ends up developing there. Um, but yeah, overall, the guys really picked up where Yurick left off, and they looked pretty good. Pompriant had a really nice relief outing. I think in a couple of his previous outings, he hadn't looked like he had in the beginning of the season. So, it was good to see him come out there with I believe, 4 innings.
No,
He
that was
pitched.
Smith.
Was that Smith?
That was Smith.
Okay. Um, Either way, he looked really good. And then, offensively, we looked really good too, getting 13 hits.
Yeah, yeah, I feel your sentiment there with Yorick because I kind of raised my eyebrows too when we had Will Allen on the mound. Nothing against Will Allen, like you said, I thought he looked pretty good. Kind of got stretched out, and maybe just needs to kind of work on that, and we'll kind of build up to getting more consistent innings. But York wasn't even going down to the bullpen. Whenever the pitchers all went down to the bullpen, and so that kind of told me right there, like he's not even really in the cards here and hasn't been all weekend. And so that does bring up, the injury concerns, and you're hoping he's okay. Um, but like I said, liked Will Allen, really big kid, looks good on the mound, looked really good early. And then, like I said, as things kind of stretched out, it seems like it fell off a little bit. And coach probably had really short leashes right here. He went to Dominic Pompriant to face the left on left, get through the out. And then came to Caden Smith, who really was the bulk of this one, with 58 pitches, 4.2 innings. Only 6 strikeouts atop the bottom. So, Rice was putting it in play. But really, who I want to highlight here is Nolan Bernard, who comes in on Sunday and pitches 2 innings after giving us, 2+ innings, right? On no, 2.2
Yeah,
innings, right, on
2.2.
Friday. So that's 4.2 innings for Nolan Bernard over the course, of the weekend. That's like an additional start that you're getting out of your bullpen guys. There's another guy we talked about last year that did that a lot, and that was Robert Orlowski, who was a really big piece to UTSA and their success. He's hurt this season. You've kind of seen what that void has done to them. I think if Nolan Bernard kind of becomes a guy like that for us, that's a really key role and piece where, again, he comes in multiple games, he gives us multiple innings. It all adds up to a start in the end. We're just kind of getting it at more key moments. Um, but yeah, again, this was where the offense kind of broke out, was able to get the runs across. Bradkey Laurie had a huge day, 3 hits. Eli Thomas comes out with 2 hits. Nathan Early, really big day, has another multi-hit day. This is where he had the really, really big home run. Um, which, I was kind of calling him out, right? I was kind of saying, hey, I think Early really needs to find this power thing, or we might have to see where we can find that power in other ways, because typically your first basemen are the guys that you're one of those typical power spots, right? And then as soon as I say that, he launches one into left field. So, or I'm sorry, right field. So, what did you think of that? Were you able to see that one live?
Yeah, so honestly, the whole Sunday we finally got to see some good extra base hits. Eli Thomas, like you mentioned, he had a great day at the plate. He had a double and a triple. Got a double and a home run from early. And then honestly, Brad Laurie, he was an on-base machine. He was 3 for 4 at the plate. He scored twice, and he even drove in a run as well. Overall, that was definitely one of our better offensive performances. What it seems like maybe 3 weekends. So, really glad to see the offense come alive a little bit there.
Absolutely. Well, in the end, it was enough to get the series win. And I'm going to be honest, I'm a little, I'm encouraged coming out of this series. I thought, like I said in my pregame or my preseason preview for the conference, I actually kind of made the statement that I thought Rice could be in the top three of this conference. Not really sure if they're going to make it that far. I think there's some really good teams in this conference they're going to be competing with. One of them, obviously, is us, who just kind of took two of three of them. But again, I thought it was great, and I'm also encouraged. You never want to lose on Friday night, but when we lost on Friday night, that's kind of where I was just like, this might be a watershed moment for this team, right? Are they going to be able to bounce back and grab these next two? Because we had never been in that situation, right? We had always kind of gumped out, grabbed Friday. We usually grab Saturday, right? And we were sweeping to grab Sunday, but we had never kind of been in that situation where we were chasing the series. And I thought we were doing that, where we got it back on Saturday and then had to seal it on Sunday. So I was actually really, really encouraged with how this series shaped out for us. What were your kind of some of your notes as you were watching it, just overall?
Yeah, and I think Rice is actually a pretty good team too. I believe they came into the series 14-9, if I'm not mistaken. And they definitely look like a different team from years past. And honestly, in years past, they've kind of given us fits too. I believe in the last 2 seasons, we're like 1-5 or 1-6 against them. So for us to get a series win against a team that's actually improving was a really big moment for us, and it's a great way to set the right tone for conference play and kind of continue what we've been doing all season long.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. I think Rice is going to steal a few series that maybe that they're not expected to. I think Charlotte, UTSA, and even ECU. I think they're all going to have to be watching out for the Rice Owls. Um, Well, I think at this point, real quick, let's go ahead and look at what our conference mates did last weekend. And I had that schedule up and then I lost it, but I'll bring it back. Um, or actually, no, you know what I was using for that was the new Diamond app, Diamond Baseball app, which is actually a really cool app if you're not using it. A little unpaid kind of sponsorship here, but Um, what I like most about this is you filter everything score wise. You can filter it with your conferences. And so you can actually go to the American. And if you go on to Sunday, it'll actually kind of give you, who won the series, right? It'll give you the series win or loss. And a lot of the scoreboards around college baseball aren't really doing that. And so, real quick, running through it, the results from last week: UTSA traveled to Florida Atlantic and won the series 2-1. UAB traveled to East Carolina. East Carolina won that series 2-1. We obviously won our series against Rice. And what I believe is the upset of the week, and I'm going to ask you your thoughts on this one, is the Charlotte went to Wichita and and lost the series 2-1 against the Shockers. And then Tulane won their series with Memphis coming to them. So right off the bat, I think, the most interesting result of the weekend has got to be Wichita State and Charlotte, with Wichita State pulling off the win. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, with Wichita, they always impress me with their ability to hit the ball. So I don't think it really comes as a complete surprise to me. I know Charlotte's been off to a really good start, but I think we'll see as we get into conference play that a lot of these teams, especially like if you look at our basketball conference, when you looked at, the teams that were 5 through 8 or 5 through 9. They were all very similar, and I feel like when it comes down to it in our baseball conference, we're going to see a lot of that as well. I think that we'll see maybe two or three teams that separate themselves from the rest of the group, but ultimately, I think it's going to be a battle week in and week out to win series, and it's definitely for me not too surprising.
Yeah, I think that's what jumps out to me, right? Is no sweeps. Nobody got swept. Everything was 2-1. I think that could be a common theme, right, as we go. Even with teams like Memphis and Tulane, I think, again, they might get swept here or there. But I think the parity kind of top to bottom is really, really, any given weekend, right? You got to bring your A game or they're going to get you. Was there any other weekend series here for the conference mates that stood out to you as interesting?
I thought the UTSA FAU result was interesting. I thought maybe FAU could have taken that series. They've had a slow start, but I think as of lately they're playing a little bit better. But overall, I do think that it was kind of as expected across the board.
Yeah, I think what really jumped out to me was Memphis kind of jumped out on Tulane and took Friday night. And you were thinking, well, maybe that might be something. You saw that UAB and East Carolina had a really, really close Friday night. East Carolina ended up taking Saturday too, so I thought that was interesting. But Charlotte put up 19 runs on Wichita State on their Saturday game with 24 hits. And so I think that's kind of the thing with Wichita State. I think they do have a really good offense. I don't know about their pitching. You could say the same. I've said the same stuff about UTSA. I don't know about their pitching. I don't know of how it's going to hold up whenever you're playing teams like, like us, right? Not unfortunately, but, unbiasedly is what I want to say. When you play teams like us, like South Florida, we're able to kind of put things together. It is going to be interesting to see how Charlotte kind of responds going forward. Um, any final thoughts on this past weekend before we move on to start looking at the midweeks?
Let's look at the midweeks.
All righty, let's start with ours. We are going to travel to Florida Gulf Coast University down in Fort Myers. It's actually where my employer's kind of home base, and a lot of Florida Gulf Coast University employee, alumni are also, peers of mine of my employment. So none of them are a lot of baseball fans, but whenever we win, I usually let them know. So they know when we win, they don't know when they win. That's on their thing. But throughout the history, Bulls are 11-5. I'm sorry, that was the last matchup, was 11-5, Bulls victory. All time 10 wins, 22 losses for the Bulls. So again, this is a team that usually catches us on the midweek. I think we're a little bit different of a team in the midweek, but FGCU's got some firepower. What do you think about the Eagles?
Yeah, you're right about that. I feel like every time we play them, it's a high scoring affair. And, I think most likely tomorrow we'll end up going with a bullpen game unless we're surprised with maybe Landon Urick, which, could be a possibility. Obviously, he didn't pitch this weekend. Hopefully, he's healthy. But, I do think that it's going to be a high scoring affair. And we'll probably see a lot of arms out of our bullpen. Probably be a bullpen game. So, it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out.
Yeah, I think DeCardenas is probably a candidate to get some bulk innings tomorrow, hopefully. Um, I do want to point out also, they're 15-2 at home, 4-5 on the road. So they're actually they're a much better team at home than they are on the road. Uh, One of the teams to beat them at home though is Indiana State, and then Boston College got them at home as well. Um, interesting matchups. They faced UCF and lost 5-12 in a midweek, and are actually coming off a winning or beating FAU in their last midweek 12-4. So, they've got some precedents against the American. Again, I think their offense is or their team is going to be offensively driven. I think that's kind of what they do. They hit the ball really well. And so it's going to be on our off or on our pitching staff to kind of counteract that. Again, I think we got the guys in the pen there to be able to do it. But it's kind of one of those things, you still got to get out there and do it.
Yeah, I think also this past weekend they struggled a little bit too. So if I'm not mistaken, I believe they got swept by UNF.
They did.
Um,
Absolutely.
so I'm sure they're going to come out hungry, looking to get that win, and our pitching has to be on and sharp to make sure we get our win.
Yeah, they probably are hungry because they got swept by a combined 4 runs. 4-5 loss on Friday night, 6-7 on Saturday, and then 6-4 on Sunday. So, they were kind of always right there and just couldn't really pull it off and end up getting the sweep, getting swept. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. Looking at our American Conference mates, there are a few interesting matchups coming up in the midweek. We have Duke. I'm sorry, East Carolina will travel to Duke. FAU travels to Miami. It says Charlotte versus Queens. I'm assuming they're going to be traveling there. Jacksonville State goes to UAB. We go to obviously FGCU. Ole Miss and probably the marquee opponent for the midweek will go to Memphis, and Texas A&M Corpus Christi goes to UTSA. That's on Tuesday, and then Wednesday, Rice is going to Houston Christian, and Grambling State going to Tulane. And does that stick out to you?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I think with Queens, they're actually in Charlotte as well. And I was because of the basketball tournament, I was doing a little bit of research on them. And it was interesting. Apparently, last year they had a merger with Elon University, but I think they're
Nice.
actually planning on keeping their sports teams separate. But that's just an interesting tidbit. Obviously, they've gained some relevance with the NCAA basketball tournament. So be interesting to see how their baseball team's gonna do against a conference opponent.
So interesting. I would have never thought about that school being in Charlotte. Like when it says Queens, for some reason I thought New York. But I don't even know if Queens is big enough to host a college. Um, but that's just immediately where I went to. And then you were like Charlotte, and I was like, oh wow, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so maybe that game's like in a neutral site or something.
That could be what it is. Absolutely. So yeah, that'll be interesting. I might try to check that out. 30 minutes, starting 30 minutes before ours. So I'll probably kind of take a gander at that one before I venture over to ours. I'm interested too in that FAU versus Miami matchup. That's a kind of a big one down there, down south. And then again, Ole Miss going to Memphis. If Memphis can pull off that win, that's a huge win for the conference, as well as for Memphis too. And then I think Houston Christian is a pretty good team for Rice to be going up against in the midweek. I think they've got a, I think they've got a win against UTSA this year, if I'm not mistaken. Or no, they have a win against Rice already. So this is the second matchup against them. I knew I'd seen them. Oh no, they did play UTSA. Or I'm sorry, no, that was Texas. My bad. Oh no, I'm sorry. Yes, March 17th, Tuesday. They beat UTSA as well. So this is a team that's catching people on catching these American teams on the midweek. Rice needs to kind of pick it up and get a victory there. Um, but yeah, I think we will announce the American Conference rankings. I'm going to post those, I think, first thing tomorrow morning. So you'll see that on X, probably along with a repost of our podcast here. Um, do you want to look at them real quick?
Let's do it.
Yeah. All right. I think I got it right here. All right. So was some interesting movement. Um, In the end, South Florida stays on top. East Carolina moves to the second spot. Charlotte drops to third. UTSA uh, is still in the fourth position. Wichita State moves up to five. FAU at six. UAB seven. Rice is at 8, Tulane stays at 9, and Memphis is at 10. So, what sticks out to you is kind of interesting, and then I'll do my best to maybe try to give it an explanation.
Um, I would say I think UAB is better than their positioning in the rankings because I think they're pretty close to winning that series if I'm not mistaken. They look pretty competitive. And then I would say aside from that, got to give the Bulls a shout out. Number one, looking extremely good. I think we're the first team in our conference to get to 20 wins. And I think we have like, if you look at the overall standings, we got like a 3 game lead over everyone else. Not, just conference play alone, but just looking at overall records.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think UAB is a little bit better than maybe what is shown. I think problem is their pitching is really rough right now. They're sporting a 7.01 ERA and a 1.7 on the WHIP, and so both of those sit pretty low in the conference, as well as only 6.08 strikeouts per game, which I believe is least by almost a strikeout. And so their pitching is really kind of woefully short right now, and that's what I think is kind of holding them back. Because you're right, they do have really good strength of schedule. They've played really good teams, and they've come out of it 14 and 10. I just think right now they got to do a little bit more in the games to maybe get that jump up. I think the other thing that stood out to me as I looked at it and made me kind of start looking at things was, you see that Wichita State gets the win over Charlotte and doesn't really get that jump. But I think when you look at it, you just can't overreact to Charlotte dropping this series versus kind of what they've done as a whole. And I don't think they kind of deserve to jump UTSA as well. I think if there's probably more of an argument about UTSA jumping Charlotte. But again, I think that's really kind of close. I think you still got a top four here that's kind of jockeying it out. But I do think there's a clear number one, and that is South Florida. But I think, two, three, and four are really kind of jockeying it out. They don't, any given weekend could maybe separate them as they're going. Charlotte could really fall here if they let a couple more series get away from them. And Wichita State could be the benefactor there to kind of jump up. But I think that kind of stood out to me right there. You have any other kind of final thoughts?
Yeah, I was also looking at Warren Nolan recently and just looking at our page on that website, and it was saying that, as of right now, we're projected to go 44 and 11, which if we do that, we're looking at, you know, 20 and 7 in conference, most likely being the 1 seed going into the AAC tournament. If not 1 seed, maybe 2 seed. And looking at a very real opportunity to even host a regional, which, is kind of a dream of mine to host a regional at the Red. So, all that is in front of us, and we're looking like the best team in the conference right now. So, hopefully we continue that and continue to get better too as the season goes on.
Absolutely. I think you're right. I think hosting a regional is within the reach. I think there's a lot we've got to get done in the conference right now. But I do think that's a possibility if we can kind of keep things rolling how they're rolling. We've got some tough series coming up. We talked about I mentioned earlier, or actually I think I did it in our group chat. This coming weekend is going to be a big one for the conference. You got us traveling to Charlotte. You've also got ECU traveling to UTSA. So that's going to be your top four teams right there that are going to be battling it out. So I expect some movement after this next weekend in those top four, and I expect to kind of know kind of a little bit more about what's happening. But speaking more towards South Florida, once we get past going to Charlotte, we're also going to have to go to UTSA after the Rice series, and then we're going to have to go to ECU after the UAB series or UAB series. Yeah, so it's good that we don't necessarily get any of them back to back, but we are going to get them all on the road. And so that's going to be kind of a tough challenge as we go forward. But yeah, I'm ready for it. How about you?
I was gonna say, yeah, I think we'll know pretty quickly within the first month or 5 weeks of the conference slate, how our guys stack up and, if we are who we think we are. And, I think those road tests will be challenging, but we're going to find out pretty quickly where we stand within this conference and how far we can really go this season.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Bulls fans, that's all we have for you tonight. Again, be on the lookout for our next episode, which will be dropping later on this week, I think it's been announced, right? The interview's been announced. I think I saw that. Yeah, so Michael Sine will be on with John and Mark and maybe Matt later on. I don't know if you're going to sit down with them too, but they're going to be on with Michael Sine. They'll also give you a little bit of a preview of what we got coming up in the weekend. But you will not want to miss that. So make sure you are liking, subscribing, and then just give us a little comment. Tell us how we're doing. Only if it's good though. We don't like that. But until next time, Bulls fans, as always, go Bulls.
Go Bulls.